Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello everyone, Chris here. Thank you for watching this video. I'm grateful to you. And I want to speak to you about a book called Codename Angelique. And it's one of those books which is actually available in South Africa in hardcover on print on demand. That's what they call it. You know, you order the book, they print the book, they courier the book to you. And as I always say to people, and forgive me for saying this in every video, but I have no way of knowing whether you watched the other videos or not. I just don't know. You support the books, you support the channel. It's that simple, because the money goes back to the channel. So in Codename Angelique is actually very, very interesting. If you are interested in counterterrorism operations, then this is actually a book you have to read, because it is a book which of an operation, the testing phase anyway, which has changed dramatically counterterrorism, and certainly it's not even known in the West. I won't roll my eyes. I had to ban a few people from previous videos because I made some sarcastic comments about the state of the British Army, who has more horses than tanks. And then, of course, I explained that the Royal Navy actually has more admirals than warships, and that the two aircraft carriers don't even have aircraft, and they don't have protection ships to protect them, like frigates or cruisers, or when I say cruisers, I mean these anti-Aegis type class destroyers. That's what I mean, to protect them. They don't have it. It's unbalanced. The Navy is totally unbalanced. It's a zero in a contract, actually, and the RAF, well, they started with still in Nazi with affirmative action, and so now we don't have enough pilots. Man, there's something wrong with the West and with NATO, and you can get angry with me as much as you want. You don't have to get the books. I don't care, really. But if you get snotty with me and you start making snot comments, attacking the author, attacking me, attacking the channel, you know what? You're just going to get banned. So rather keep quiet and just carry on with your life. I wish you well. But the fact is, in the GMJ books, as we do deal with facts. We deal with hard military facts, which a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people don't want to know, but nevertheless, they are true. And I assure you, if I know it, then your so-called enemies, which is basically BRICS, as well as you take out of BRICS, it will be China and Russia, mostly. South Africa is also up there for other reasons, which has to do with a court case which the South African government brought against Israel and actually won, declaring Netanyahu and I think the defense minister or somebody from Israel to be war criminals and wanted by the International Criminal Court. Well, they'll never be arrested, so I don't. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's not going to help the Palestine people. It's not going to help Israel. It's just one of those wasted things. But whatever. That's one of the reasons why South Africa is now being targeted by the US, and you can actually expect a type of a color revolution in the future. It's going to happen. Where it will leave you, who look like me, and other people who's a bit more sane, I don't know, guys. I don't know. But let's get back to the topic anyway. The point I was trying to make is in these books you will read facts which a lot of people don't like to read. But there is no such thing in the GMJ books of just grabbing something out of the air and then making up stories or whatever. These things are based upon research. There's a lot of research behind them. So if the characters start saying to you certain things, then you better listen, because they can back what they say. If you do some research, you will probably find out. So we became a problem with counterterrorism, and by that I mean to either rescue somebody from a house or a compound, or to go and kill somebody there. That's the nature of a game. You either rescue or you kill, and you often kill during the rescue, and you kill as most effectively as you can. I mean, you shoot in the head, you double tap. Interesting to me how little the Western Special Forces actually know about the word double tap. I spoke to quite a few of them, and they would stare at me like, what are you talking about? it's, it's amazing because the double tap is a thing I measure these people, the hostage rescuers. I actually measure them against the double tap and the way they shoot. And if they don't even know what it is, then I immediately classify you as Mickey Mouse. You should know. And you should also know where it comes from. And as far as we know, it comes out in the books. It's from Special Operations Executive, that wartime sabotage unit, which Churchill created after he got his ass kicked in France and Europe, and they had to run away, which they did through Dunkirk. Okay, I've annoyed some English people again. Still, it's true. You ran away. You ran away. Even people like Churchill said you ran away. There's no medal for Dunkirk. And it wasn't only at Dunkirk, it was in other places too. And in another book, or another video, Codename Caribbean, we actually look at wartime losses. And we see how many soldiers France lost in that 6 weeks. And we'll see how many the England. I'm not talking about the Commonwealth, which they anyway don't include when they speak about poor old England standing alone in 1940. Oh, shame. Of course you didn't. But anyway, we'll see how many men you actually lost during the entire war. It's not going to turn out well for you. And just military fact, there was one guy who wrote to me and he said, actually made a comment and got him banned. Says, I have an inferiority complex about the English. When I'm an Afrikaner, I don't have inferiority complexes against you. In fact, I don't have inferiority complex against anybody. Well, perhaps my wife, in a certain way. She's smarter than me. But anyway, in Special Operations Executive, that's where it started. The double tap shooting. And then after the Munich massacre, when the British SAS actually led the way with counterterrorism in the West, not in the other countries. There were other units already in Russia and Soviet Union dealing with this type of thing, but of course, we are Western orientated. We don't know these things. They introduced the double tap again because they quickly realized they couldn't shoot somebody quickly enough dead with their Brownings, which is a fantastic pistol. In fact, when we had that video of the three special forces men speaking, one of the questions was which handgun, which pistol would you prefer? And all of them went for the Browning high power. Fantastic. Still to this day, but I think the Glocks. Yeah, I think a Glock 17 might actually be better now. But guys, we can speak about that in a different episode. I find these type of things very fascinating. Anyway, that's where the double tap came from. And then the Rhodesians of all people started using it on their R1s. They would do shit like that. And I know in my own time in the police counterinsurgency units, we were definitely trained to shoot like that. Not at the police college. The police college people, instructors they were there. But I doubt if I had much practical experience, as I said in my book, the Main Street Police book series and the Gewetenlose Strate. That's why I don't think they had time or the inclination to teach people how to survive on the streets, the policemen, because they didn't have the knowledge themselves. Now, we had the same problem in the police, in my humble opinion, with the instructors at Medioskop and Verdrag, where this is where you got trained for your counterinsurgency as well as anti-riot course taking place there. Very military orientated, and the training was very, very good. The guys who went the army training as well, they rated the police training actually better. Again, I think a lot of people will now be a bit upset. But that's what they said. And what I found is that even these instructors were not that clued up. But they followed the manual, and that's all they could do, and perhaps that's what they had to do. We also had fantastically good instructors there, a few expeditions, and a few men who really knew what they were doing, who had practical experience. It's like everything in life, you know. Practical experience is everything. I saw it in law as well. If the first time you hear a story, it is quite, you know, you have to think a bit what you're going to do. The next time you hear it, you know what to do. So you get that edge, which with practical experience is very, very, very important. But anyway, to speak about Codename Angelique, it's a funny thing in Africa is that sub-Saharan Africa now is that when you are taken hostage, there's quite a few differences between the rest of the world. And if you looked at my series, which I spoke about, Surviving as a Hostage, then I discuss these things in greater detail, but they're also in the books, in different books. I just grabbed them out, also what I knew anyway. So the chances are that you will be kept with other hostages, because it's a business to them, you know, especially in a place like Nigeria. And then also, you will not be kept mostly inside the city limits in a flat or something like it would be in Europe, because this poor things doesn't have houses. I was actually shocked when I lived in Europe to see what low standard living we actually have. You know, if you have like a nice 3-bedroom house with a swimming pool and a lawn and a double garage, man, you live better than 99% of the swine of the Swiss people can live or dream to live even. For them, a little pipsqueak flat somewhere, the 10th floor is, man, that is just a life for them. Shame. But that's why they're always out. They're always walking around looking sad and sullen and angry, and we have the children crying. But, you know, I made a very nice video on Switzerland, Swineland. And I would advise you, go and look at it. Don't just take what you read and see at face value. Go and speak to the people who are actually there, who actually lived there, who can tell you a few stories about the swine, which you will definitely think is amazing, because you don't hear about these things. I mean, they suppress it. The other day, I actually made a comment on one of their YouTube channels, and they showed this most beautiful mountains and everything. You know, God really did a fantastic job there creating it. And then I said, oh, well, it's beautiful, but, you know, then sadly there's the sour Swiss. Ugh, it wasn't 5 minutes and this thing was removed. Comment was immediately removed, and I was mad. So it showed it must have gotten to him. But anyway, the thing is, in counterterrorism is first you need to know where's the hostage, or you need to know where's the target which you want to strike, and then you have to get onto target. That's where the problem comes in, and that's where this book comes in. Because it turned out that in Iraq and even Afghanistan, the Western forces, well, I don't think they rescued a lot of people. They did murder and killed a lot of people, that's true. And they lost a lot of airframes, something like 400. They lost 400 aircraft in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's the entire Air Force, man. Big Air Force. And why did they lose them? Because they can't land. They don't know how to land in dusty conditions. They tip them. They were not shot down. Most of them were not shot down. The enemy had no air force to oppose them. Shame. And so I asked the Israelis, I asked them, well, what do you do? And the Israelis said to me, look and practice. Practice. That's what you do. In fact, my late wife, she wrote the software for the simulators for the Marines anyway, to land in dusty conditions. But you have to go and do that yourself. And to be honest with you, the South African Air Force also lost a Puma, I think in 1981. When same thing happened, the guys got disorientated inside, and the helicopter drifted back, and it struck something with a tail rotor and started flitting, and I think six people died. May they rest in peace. But there's a difference between losing one helicopter and 400 of them. But you know, in Vietnam, comes out in codename Green 41, the US lost 10,000 helicopters. Yeah, 10,000. Which is not to say all of them were written off, right? Many of them were recovered, but at least 10,000 were either shot down or crashed. It's amazing. It's amazing, these statistics. But what you would normally do is when you approach this target area is you have different scenarios. So one is you would come in with helicopters and you just flare, helicopter flares. Guys fast broke down, which was brought to South Africa, by the way, by the South African Railway Police Special Forces team or task force under command of our chaplain Andre Willeke. They were the ones who brought this technique in. Special Forces Army then followed them, and police, the South African Police Special Task Force then followed them as well. But they were the ones who brought it in. Some bit of dispute about it, but that's how what came out on Legacy. So they would fast rope down and they would storm the place. The other way is you would walk in. In other words, you would surround the place and then just go in. It soon turned out that in Iraq and Afghanistan, it just didn't work because the terrorists are not that stupid. They know these techniques very well, and they know them because some of them are trained by special forces. If you read Codename Caribbean or listen to the video where I speak about it, you will find out that Pakistani special forces were involved in the attack in Mumbai. And they were actually supposed to attack a passenger ship. They were not supposed to attack the hotels. They did at the end, but they weren't supposed to do it. It wasn't the first prize, so to speak. But we'll get to that too. I will speak about it in another video. The point is that terrorists are well aware of this, so they can either ambush helicopters because they do have SAMs, surface-to-air missiles, good ones too, especially with Ukraine now, because a lot of that weapons ended up in Africa, and they are just shooting out whatever they want to shoot out with it, especially in the Sahel, Sahel area in West Africa. We're finding that weapons there now. And it's a matter of time before we're going to start using it against civilian airliners. It's going to happen. Home goal number 2 for the second beast of a Bible, it's the US. People don't think, they just pump those weapons into the most corrupt country in the world. They lose track of these weapons immediately. They've got no idea where those weapons went to. They don't know where the money went to. And now these weapons are turning out of terrorists. They were even shooting at the Israelis with the same missiles and things which came basically from the West via Ukraine. Now, whatever. So that method doesn't work well anymore because you have to come in, you have to flare, it's noisy, there's no such thing as a stealth helicopter, it doesn't exist. And there's, of course, a very good chance that American pilots will crash the helicopter, they always do, at the rate of Bin Laden. Hello, yeah, no, they crashed with the helicopter right into the compound. Shame. That rate where I think Koki was killed, a South African teacher, may he rest in peace, in Yemen, I believe. Around about there. The same story, they came with one of these Ospreys and they just crashed the thing. Of shame. And they fired, I think, 57,000 shots that morning to rescue these people. And they killed dozens of innocents. It's pathetic. Pathetic. But anyway, they think they're fantastic. So that's good. Let them think that. But in my world, no, we don't rate them highly. But you know what, once again, there's people who take greater exception to what I'm saying, but no, and it's in the books, of course. But guys, if you're not good, you need to be told you're not good. Otherwise, you cannot improve your standard. I'm not saying these things because we hate you. I'm saying these things because, you know what, looking from the outside, standing a bit further back, we do see a lot of things which you probably can't see yourself for whatever reason. But anyway, so that method doesn't really work. So in Iraq and Afghanistan, they started thinking, oh, well, they can drop the guys off, say about 15 kilos away from the target, and then they walk in the middle of the night, and then they get there, and then they attack. It did work a few times, but mostly not. Simply because, once again, the terrorists evolved. And they had guys with cell phones and things standing around, and they would give codes out once this attacking force would approach. And yeah, you can say to me, well, then why don't you just block the cell phone reception? Well, go and do that and see what happens to the hostages. They know when an attack is coming. They wait for you, and they ambush you, and they kill you. In fact, I think in the last 20 years almost, I believe only one hostage was ever rescued. Western Special Forces in Sub-Saharan Africa. But let's make it a bit more. I know there were some operations in Somalia, which also done, but that wasn't done by official forces. That was done by Blackwater, or something like Blackwater, where they used ex-special forces to get in to rescue some missionaries. But that was just a rescue mission. They weren't shooting to release them as hostages. They were just sort of trapped. But really, their record is extremely bad. It's bad. And so that method won't work, the one of the flaring of helicopters. And the other one which wouldn't work is where you walk in because you're going to get picked up, you're going to be ambushed. And once again, once your hostage is dead, the mission is a failure. It doesn't matter who else you kill there and what happens further. The fact is it's a failure. And if you go in to grab somebody, to snatch somebody, or you want to kill somebody, or you want to grab computers and cell phones and things, you know what? Those things can also be wiped or blown up or whatever if they know you're coming. So that was a scenario which we faced in Codename Angelique, is to come out with an idea. How can we overcome this? What can we do? How can we get a special forces team, whether it's from the intelligence units or from the army or from the police or combined or whatever, doesn't matter. How do we get that assault team right inside that compound without them knowing they're there? And the solution we came up with is something like I said, which basically changed counterterrorism, because we started looking at history. Now, I don't have any history degree. My degrees are in law, which is it's good to have law degrees. It does help you in life. It does make you extremely boring, of course, but it's good too. In law, you should be boring. You don't want changes all the time. It's like Trump is doing now with just deporting people and grabbing people and say they don't have a freedom of speech or whatever. If they say anything against Israel, then of course they get banned and they get deported immediately if they're foreigners, even if they're legally there. That type of thing is turning the legal system upside down, and it's never a good thing. There will never something good come out of that. You need boring lawyers. Way better. But the more boring they are, the better. Law should never become an exciting thing. It's exciting when there's something wrong. Then you're heading for disaster. But history is important because we can learn from history, because history repeats. You know that. I mean, every generation makes the same stupid mistakes. Everyone. And history is not something which is taught anymore in any real real way. I think up to about 1910, 1920, in the US universities, you need to have history as a subject before you could get a degree. By now, it is like, I think 98% or something like that, degrees will not include history. So in other words, the Americans really are as stupid as we think they are. They know nothing about history. They won't even know anything about any other country, and they know basically nothing of their own country, and they can't read. That's also what the research has shown, is they got the literacy level of the standard 3 child. So most of them cannot read. They cannot understand what they're reading. I discussed this in Oath of Evil, the war on Protestantism, because that's part of a way of turning the US into the second beast, so we can go back to the Middle Ages, where you also had a largely uneducated population, and then you had these few priests, the Catholic priests, who could explain the Bible to them, even though they couldn't because they were serving Satan, and blah, blah, blah. Go and read the book. You will see the pattern is repeating. But in the intelligence world, in the shadow world, history is actually extremely important. I mean, your best agents and spy masters and things are absolute experts on history. They do know everything about former operations, and they do learn from them, and then they apply what they've learned. And so what I did is I started looking at history, and I thought to myself, well, there is a certain type of aircraft where you can actually come in without radar picking you up, which is silent, which is fairly big. You can load a lot of people in it, and which can land basically anywhere. And that is called a glider, a military glider. Now, the problem was the last military gliders were used in 1965 in the Soviet Union. And since then, gliders don't exist in military inventories anymore. It's an old concept. It's gone out. Helicopters has replaced it. And I have to say also from the beginning that when you use a military glider on counterterrorism, it's very specific. It won't work for everywhere. It might work in some other places, but it is not for general use, if you understand what I mean. It's for specialized use. And I started looking at glider history operations, and I found out that in 1940, when the Blitzkrieg started, Fort Eben-Emael, I think in Belgium, got attacked by some, I think it was Luftwaffe paratroopers. And they took this fort and they opened the way for the panzers to get through. Now, fascinating is when these people got decorated by Hitler, they were wearing their combat uniforms. They had their helmets on and their combat uniform. They were the only ones ever to do that. After that, whenever you got back to Hitler to be decorated, you would get a new uniform, like your dress uniform, and that's how you got decorated. That's very interesting. The other thing which also came out, and this is in the book, is that 2 of them were executed because they left their base during training or rehearsals for the attack. I don't know, to go to a pub or something. They got caught and they got executed. That is how you keep operational security. Some people say it wasn't that bad actually, but that's what most of the research shows. And that was a special forces operation par excellence. I mean, they took us fort. There were, I think, 1,000 people inside it, and they just neutralized it. And they got there without being observed. Because again, even in those days where radar was in its infancy almost, you couldn't pick up the wooden gliders. And then thereafter, you had D-Day, you had the rescue of Mussolini. That's also something very, very interesting. And also the 1944 attack on Marshal Tito's headquarters in the old Yugoslavia. That was also a special forces operation. So there's a link between glider operations and special forces. especially with the pilots. The Brits had the idea that your glider pilots had to go and fight with whatever they're carrying. So they were carrying the people at D-Day, and they landed, they would get out and join the fight. The Americans had the opposite way of doing it. It's explained in the books too. They're pilots, and that's it. They stayed to be pilots. And so I thought to myself, is it possible to load special forces teams inside these gliders and land them right on top of this target? Can that be done? And that is what the book is about. It's about the test flights and trying to see if this concept will work. And in a later book, codenamed Malise, this is exactly what is being tested. Yeah, in codename Malise, there were two things actually tested. The one was if you could combine special forces of different units, like take somebody from the SAS of the UK, take somebody from the South African Army Special Forces, take somebody from Israel, take somebody from French Army Special Forces, put them on a command of an Israeli officer or somebody competent, and see if they can work together on the mission. The answer is absolutely yes, of course they can. But you need to rehearse and you need to trust each other. And yes, they do things a bit differently, but it can be done, which is interesting. It's an interesting concept. And also, before you attack this place, but I don't want to go too deep into it because I will make an episode on Malise as well, which, by the way, refers to my late wife, Melissa. The name in French would be Malise. That's how she introduced herself to me. Yeah, it's a long story, but anyway, she had nothing to do with this operation whatsoever. I just used the name. The code names doesn't refer to the actual operation. It just refers to something. It's typical of military's code names anyway. You never would say it's Operation Rescue Mussolini. No, you would say it's Operation whatever. So that people who find out about it don't know what it's about. Which means that as an author, you can then use the code name to refer to something which is important to you, and maybe only you will know exactly why you used that particular name. So anyway, so that's what the book is about. It's a test flying. Normally, test flying is boring because you fly a very specific envelope, engineers, and the things are there. This is not as boring as that because it's done impromptu and it's done practical. We got hold of an old glider from the Soviet Union, and they started testing this thing. A lot of things go wrong. A lot of things went well. That's what the book is about. As I say, it changed counterterrorism in the world. Not in the West, because they're still too daft to even know about it. Even though they were informed, by the way, but they just blew about it. So I believe the Chinese now is using it at a great scale, and I believe the Russians as well. And I've heard somewhere that the Indians are also looking at it very, very closely. The South Africans who actually designed this thing and this concept, by using it, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't expect to know. What I do know, though, is you can load a whole bunch of Chinese Special Forces members into one of these things. Because they're smaller, you can load about 35 of them for, say, 20 of let's say, South Africans or the bigger Western type of people. Because just the weight and body shape, So anyway, that's a book. I really hope you enjoy it. I hope you can get hold of it. As I said, it is available in South Africa. It's also an audio, as well as Kindle, as well as hardcover, softcover, all on Amazon. I'll leave the links for you below in the description. And thank you for listening to me, and God bless.